The story of Santeria begins not in the Caribbean, but deep within West Africa. It originates among the Yoruba people. Their homeland, the land of Yoruba, spans modern-day Nigeria, Benin, Togo. For centuries before the Atlantic slave trade, the Yoruba developed a complex and sophisticated religious worldview. This faith was not separate from daily life. It was woven into the very fabric of their society, culture, and identity. It explained the universe. Central to the Yoruba faith is a belief in a single, all-powerful creator god. This deity is known as Olodumare. However, this god is considered too vast and remote to be directly worshipped by humans. Instead, Olodumare works through a pantheon of emissaries. These divine intermediaries are called Orishas. For example, Shango governs thunder. Shango governs justice. While Yemaya rules the oceans, Yemaya rules motherhood. It was this resilient and deeply embedded faith that would be carried across the ocean. The transatlantic slave trade represents one of the darkest chapters in human history. It was a brutal system of forced migration. Millions of Africans were captured, sold, and transported across the Atlantic Ocean. This journey, known as the Middle Passage, was horrific. Yet amidst this profound suffering, the captives fought to hold on to their humanity. They secretly shared stories, songs, and elements of their religious practices. The destination for a vast number of these Yoruba captives was the island of Cuba. Spain's colonial ambitions in the Caribbean had created a massive demand for labor. The sugar plantations in particular were voracious consumers of human lives. In Cuba, the enslaved Yoruba people were referred to as Lucumi. This term is believed to derive from a Yoruba greeting, Olukumi, meaning my friend. It became the name by which this distinct cultural and religious group was known on the island. They brought with them their deep knowledge of the Orishas, their complex divination systems, and their unbreakable spirit. Upon arrival in Cuba, families and communities were deliberately broken apart. This was a cruel strategy used by plantation owners to suppress rebellion and erase cultural identity. However, the shared foundation of the Yoruba religion provided a powerful unifying force. People who may have come from rival kingdoms in Africa now found common ground in their devotion to Shango, Ochun, or Obatala. This shared spiritual heritage allowed them to form new bonds of kinship. It was a powerful tool for survival, a secret code that their masters could not understand or destroy. The formation of Cabildos de Nación played a critical role in this preservation. These were mutual aid societies or fraternities, permitted by the Spanish authorities. However, for the Lucumi, these cabildos became sanctuaries. Within these hidden communities, the knowledge of the elders was paramount. Life on the Cuban sugar plantations was brutal and dehumanizing. The enslaved Lucumi people were forced into grueling labor from sunrise to sunset. They were subjected to harsh punishments and lived under the constant threat of violence. Their owners sought to strip them of everything that made them who they were. They were given Spanish names and forbidden from speaking their native languages. Most importantly, they were prohibited from practicing their ancestral religion. The Spanish colonial authorities, working hand in hand with the Catholic Church, saw African spiritual practices as paganism and devil worship. They were determined to eradicate these beliefs and forcibly convert the enslaved to Catholicism. Despite these oppressive conditions, the Lucumi people refused to let their faith die. They developed ingenious strategies to preserve their spiritual traditions. Rituals were conducted in the dead of night, hidden away in the sugarcane fields, or in the cramped confines of the slave barracks. Sacred drums were disguised as common stools or boxes. Sacred chants were sung in hushed tones, their meanings known only to the initiated. This clandestine practice required immense courage and a deep commitment to their heritage. It was an act of cultural resistance, a declaration that their spirits could not be enslaved even if their bodies were. Faced with the absolute demand to adopt Catholicism, the Lucumi people devised a brilliant and subtle strategy of spiritual survival: syncretism. This was not a simple replacement of one faith with another. The Lucumi recognized parallels between their Orishas and the Catholic saints. They used saints' images and stories as public-facing masks for their deities. Shango, thunder; Shango, fire; Shango, masculine virility; Shango syncretized with Santa Barbara; Babalu Aye, disease; Babalu Aye, healing; Babalu Aye paired with San Lazaro; Yemaya, mother of all; Yemaya, Orisha of the ocean; Yemaya linked to Nuestra Señora de Regla, Nuestra Señora de Regla, patron saint of Havana's harbor. Syncretism was more than a trick to fool slave owners. Over time, it formed a unique, deeply Cuban religious expression. Light a candle for Santa Barbara. Petition Shango for strength. A rich, layered faith, unmistakably African at its core, wearing a Cuban Catholic face. Ritual is the lifeblood of Lucumi Santeria. It is through specific, time-honored practices that devotees communicate with the Orishas and maintain spiritual balance. These rituals range from simple personal offerings to complex community-wide ceremonies. A common practice is the creation of a home altar, or boveda, glasses of water candles, images of their ancestors and saints. More elaborate rituals often involve offerings, known as ebo. Fruits, flowers, cooked foods, animal sacrifice. This practice is often misunderstood, but for believers, it is a sacred act of giving life force back to the Orishas to nourish them and ensure their continued blessings upon the community. Music and dance are not mere entertainment in Santeria. They are essential forms of prayer and communication with the divine. The sacred bata drums are central to this process. Iya itotele okonkolo. These are a set of 3 double-headed, hourglass-shaped drums considered to be the voice of the Orisha Anna. Each Orisha has their own specific rhythms and chants. When these rhythms are played correctly, and with the proper intention during a ceremony known as a tambor or bembe, they can invoke the Orishas to descend and possess one of their initiated priests or priestesses. This state of possession is a moment of direct communion, where the Orisha can speak, dance, and offer guidance to the community. Divination is another cornerstone of the faith, providing a way to understand the will of the Orishas and receive guidance on life's challenges. The most common method of divination is through the dilogon, a system using 16 cowrie shells. An initiated priest, known as an italero, casts the shells and interprets the patterns in which they fall. Each pattern corresponds to a specific odu, or sacred principle, which comes with a set of stories and proverbs that offer insight into the person's situation. For more complex issues, a high priest called a babalawo may be consulted. They use a system called the Table of Ifa, which is considered the most profound and direct form of communication with the Orisha of wisdom, Orunmila. Initiation is a profound, life-altering process that marks the deepest level of commitment to the religion. The ceremony, known as kariocha, or making the saint, is a complex, week-long ritual. During this time, the initiate, or iyawo, is reborn into the faith. They are ritually cleansed, their head is consecrated to their ruling Orisha, and they receive the fundamental secrets and tools of the religion. For the following year, the iyawo must adhere to strict rules, including wearing only white, to maintain a state of purity as their connection to their Orisha solidifies. The Lucumi religion is not a solitary path. It is fundamentally communal. The faith is organized around a spiritual family structure known as the il, or house temple. Each aisle is led by a godparent, priest, santero, babalocha, priestess, santera, iyalocha. This godparent is responsible for the spiritual well-being and education of their godchildren, ahijados. This relationship is one of the most important bonds in a practitioner's life. Deep trust, respect, mutual obligation. The godparent guides the godchild through divination, rituals, initiation into the priesthood. For most of its history in Cuba, Santeria was practiced in the shadows. It was viewed with suspicion and often actively persecuted by the authorities. Practitioners were frequently accused of witchcraft and criminality. Following the Cuban Revolution in 1959, the new government, officially atheist, discouraged all religious practice. Many priests and priestesses were forced underground, while others fled the island, carrying sacred traditions. The Cuban exodus was pivotal. It transformed Santeria into a global faith. As Cubans settled in the United States in cities like Miami, New York, Los Angeles, they established new aisles. In the United States, Santeria faced intense public scrutiny, particularly over the practice of animal sacrifice. This led to a landmark legal battle that went all the way to the Supreme Court. In the 1993 case of the Church of the Lucumi Babalu Aye versus City of Hialeah, the court unanimously ruled that the city's ordinances banning animal sacrifice were unconstitutional. This was a monumental victory. It affirmed that Santeria was a legitimate religion, protected under the First Amendment's guarantee of religious freedom. The Supreme Court ruling was a turning point. It brought Santeria out of the shadows and into the public square, granting it a new level of legitimacy and visibility. Today, the Lucumi Yoruba religion, or Santeria, is practiced by millions of people around the world. The sacred rhythms of the bata drums have fundamentally shaped popular music genres, most notably salsa Latin jazz. Artists like Celia Cruz, a devout follower, often embedded religious themes and chants into her music, bringing the spirit of the Orishas to a worldwide audience. From the shores of West Africa to the plantations of Cuba and now to the cities of the world, the legacy of the Lucumi people continues to thrive. It stands as an unbreakable link to an African past and a dynamic spiritual force in our modern world.